So I love that Lee has gotten our chat started. We welcome and encourage you all to include who you are, where you're from, your affiliation with TPM, if you remember the name or number for your cohort. We highly encourage you all to start that active conversation and discussion via the chat over the course of the day, but certainly now by introducing yourselves. But today we've got a great representation from our TPM family with 29 states represented today, as well as DC and Canada. The TPM network as a whole is now up to 38 states. So we've got a lot of great traction going on around the country. We've got 15 out of our 17 TPM Academy cohorts represented, and almost half of folks are first-time attendees, which is awesome because we love that we're bringing so much new energy and a lot of folks who are very excited while also representing our previous cohorts and colleagues. So we're thrilled for all of you to be here. And whether you are super familiar with TPM, whether you just started your first TPM Academy this month, just last week with our 17th cohort, or you are one of those partners who are so critical to this work, just know that you're all welcome. We're excited for you to be a part of the conversation. For those of you who have not yet participated in a TPM Academy, perhaps you are a member of an employer collaborative, working with one of our fantastic TPM practitioners or a provider partner, just know that a lot of the content is geared at those folks who have gone through TPM Academy and are very familiar with these concepts, but we know that you all will add a lot of value and contributions to today's discussion. And then of course, you're doing some incredible work back home. And in the case that you have any questions at all about, hey, what does that acronym mean again? Or can you clarify what you meant by that particular topic? Feel free to let us know, and we're glad to walk you through it and help you get just as knowledgeable as all of the other folks. So let's talk about what's on the agenda today, because we do have a lot of great content that we want to be able to have an opportunity to discuss with you all. So the first thing that we're going to do is have a general session about our talent finance initiative. We've got some familiar faces from the TPM network who've been involved in our design workshop. We will then transition to implementation breakouts. So a lot of the feedback that you all provided during our National Learning Network webinar last month, as well as the surveys that we've been doing, helped us create this agenda. And a lot of folks were interested in this idea of, I want to be with folks who are in the same place as I am in implementation, so that we can discuss and talk with one another about what our experiences have been. We'll then bring the whole group back together for an employer engagement panel with some of our incredible employer champions. So we're thrilled for them to be joining us today before we then transition into the industry breakouts. That's another format that has been really popular. So today we'll be focusing on construction, information technology, as well as emerging industries. And for those of you.
So as Jamie was saying, if you'd like to have some quality time with Jason and myself in the general session room to ask your most pressing TPM questions, we will be there for you if you're not in one of our specific industry breakouts. And then at the end of the day, we'll give you some updates on what we're doing with TPM Next and TPM Collab and what's around the corner for our community. So if we move into the next slide, we just have a couple of housekeeping notes for you. Thank you to everybody who already has their cameras on. If you'd like to go ahead and turn your camera on so everybody else can see you, that would be great. Definitely during the breakout sessions, as we want to encourage as much discussion and collaboration as possible. We'll try to use gallery view when we're in those breakouts so you can kind of see everyone, and make sure that you're muted during the discussion portions of the day. Once we get to the Q&A portions, feel free to unmute yourself, ask questions. Please, we encourage as much interaction in the chat as possible. And if you have questions during somebody's presentation, pop them in there, and there will be somebody in the room to help facilitate Q&A towards the end of each session. If you have any issues during the event, you can chat me through Zoom, or I can give you my cell phone number as well if text is easier. I actually don't know what it is off the top of my head, but I will put it in the chat as soon as I find it. And I don't see anyone right now, but if you do end up having to use a separate audio from your name, please let me know so that we can make sure that your face and your voice are in the same room when we go into our breakout sessions. Of course, with any event, we ask that you help us with tweeting throughout the event. So feel free to take screenshots, talk about what you're learning, and don't forget to stick around at the end of the day to hear about what we're doing with TPM CoLab. And yes, snacks are encouraged. If we were in person, Jamie and I were always the first people in line for any food. So feel free to eat, take a bio break when you need it, and enjoy the day. So I think with that, we will move into some announcements from Jason right before we go into our first session. So I'll go ahead and I'll pause the share. That way Jason can have the floor.
Thank you, Nick, or Nikki, and I will be very brief. Basically, just before we got started today, we did want to make sure two things were top of mind with you all as far as funding opportunities go. We know that securing resources is always a top of mind issue for our TPM network, and there are two opportunities we wanted to make sure that are on your radar. First is the money that is coming through the American Rescue Plan that's going directly to states to aid in their economic recovery. There was over $350 billion, that's billion with a B, that is being sent to states, that to be spent by states, counties, and municipal governments, a portion of which is for capital related projects and infrastructure projects, but the vast majority of it is flexible spending. Pretty much the only thing you can't spend it on is pensions. So there is a tremendous windfall coming to many states, and many of those states have needs. So certainly a lot of those fundings will be dedicated towards a set of activities or investments that are really needed right now in terms of the recovery. However, what we have heard from many states is that they are hungry for ideas on how they might best use some of those resources and what they should prioritize in terms of its use. Why we're bringing that up is if you have connections right now to your friends in state, county, or city government, now's the time to have a conversation if you have a need. And for those of you who are trying to coordinate regional, if not statewide networks, this could be a real opportunity for you to kind of band together as a team to advocate for potential investment that can help underwrite some of the workforce development activities you've undertaken. So depending on if you have a specific ask where you are co-designing a talent pipeline and a certain need has surfaced with one of your preferred providers, this could be a great way to get their need on a priority list. Or you could think much more strategically about how this one-time investment in states, cities, and counties might be used to actually help seed or further cement a set of employer-led activities for the years to come. So lots of flexibility there, but we know there's going to be a lot of folks who are going to be advocating and lobbying for how those funds should be used. We're just encouraging you all to be a squeaky wheel in case you saw this as an opportunity to potentially inject some much needed resources into the activities you've undertaken as a result of TPM. So if you have questions about that, let us know. We could tell you how to find the money. And we're also here to help you think through how you might be able to petition those who are kind of the guardians of those funds to maybe underwrite some of the activities that you have planned. Secondly, this one is not out yet, so we are getting a little ahead of it, but we should be hearing soon. We won't have a summit before this announcement goes out, but we are anticipating in the next week or two, the U.S. Department of Commerce through EDA, the Economic Development Administration, will be releasing its plans for how it plans to spend money it has received as part of the CARES plans. And they have received roughly $3 billion in EDA, of which about $750 million is set aside for tourist-related activities, not really in our lane, but $2.25 billion is there for flexible use by the Department of Commerce, and Secretary Raimundo and her team has made it a mission to actually help use or to use a significant portion, half if not more than half of that allotment in order to drive a workforce mission for their agency. So this is a one-time opportunity with the U.S. Department of Commerce, but Secretary Raimundo has long been in the workforce development business back when she was in Rhode Island as the governor, and she has wanted to carry those lessons learned into the U.S. Department of Commerce to make sure that commerce is also part of the workforce team and is using this to strategically invest in states and regions in ways that would add value to all the other workforce investments that are already going on out there, led by labor and other agencies. We have been speaking with the U.S. Department of Commerce and their team, and we have been advising them on what we have learned, largely through TPM and the work you all have led on the ground, for how, if they're going to invest, how they can invest in a way that's different from how we've invested through other channels, but also in ways that could really elevate the employer leadership role in ways that change labor market information and transform partnerships. So we have been speaking with them, advising them, and should they embed some of our best practices into this grant letting, I think you might find that your organizations will not only be eligible to apply for those resources, but they will actually support a set of activities that are very consistent with what's called for in the TPM framework. So we're hoping this opportunity happens. We wish we knew more now, but we will let you know as soon as we know. And if in fact those two things prove to be true, that the majority of the organizations in our network are eligible and the activities are consistent with TPM, we will be the first to let you know. And we would be more than happy to provide technical assistance to anybody who's seeking those opportunities, who wants to apply to try to secure those resources. Just know we're here to help. It's the power of the network. So we want to put on your radar. The state money's there now. Now's the time to go talk to some folks or mobilize a kind of a business-led coalition in your state to kind of define a workforce mission for those dollars, should that be an appropriate use. And then secondly, stay tuned for an upcoming announcement from the U.S. Department of Commerce. They're going to try to put a lot of money, hundreds of millions on the street relatively quickly. So they're going to be moving in expeditious fashion, and we want to make sure our network is first in and best supported when applying for those resources, should it be in our interest to do so. So we'll get the word out, and for one or both of those opportunities, what we are looking for at the U.S. Chamber is a sense from the community about how much we need to be, how much more organization we need to have around these efforts. We're happy to give these updates and give you the facts and give you our phone numbers so you can call us when you need us. But to the extent we need to form one or more committees to get folks who want to opt in to say, hey, I want to go for one of these opportunities, but I don't want to have to think of it all on my own. If I had a community of peers I could leverage and pick, borrow, and steal from, or get their advice or solicit their talking points for use in my own pitch, if we need to bring a team together who wants to be supporting one another in pursuit of either those state dollars or these new federal dollars, we are more than happy to kind of play that coordinating function if folks found it to be valuable. We know time is precious. We trust you to lead your work on the ground the way that you think is best. But if it made sense for us to create opportunities for us to come together as a team to provide support to one another and share resources and strategy, we are happy to play that role on your behalf. So just let us know. We hope you go get those resources. Let us know if you are. Let us know how we can support you. And if you thought it was useful to pull together a community of peers around one or more of these opportunities, just give us the word and we'll come back and see what we can do. So with that, I'm going to hand things back over to the team and we're going to get the session started. So Nikki and Jamie, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks so much, Jason. And I just requested in the chat that if that is of interest to folks, if you wouldn't mind either saying yes in the chat or giving us a thumbs up, just so that we can kind of gauge interest from folks, and then we'll take next steps from there. So we're now really excited to transition to this next portion, our first session of the conversation, in which we have a fantastic group of TPM colleagues, as well as an incredible leader in Peter Beard, who serves as Senior Vice President at the Greater Houston Partnership. Many of you know Peter for his incredible work with the Greater Houston Partnership and the Upskill Houston Initiative. Peter has been a longstanding leader in the Talent Pipeline Management National Learning Network, having originally participated in our pilot. Then we recruited him as a TPM faculty member, and then recognized him as a TPM fellow. So Peter has long shown an interest in this concept of the Talent Finance Initiative, and has been working alongside Jason and Bob Sheets to get this really moving, and connected with some incredible partners through the Federal Reserve as well as others. So we're thrilled that he has been playing such a strong leadership role, not only as part of the TPM network, but helping us bring it across the bridge through our Talent Finance Initiative. So with that, we'll hand things over to Peter, and a huge thanks to our colleagues, Marianne, Patrick, and Angela for participating in this conversation. So thanks so much, Peter.
So thanks, Nikki, or Jamie, I'm sorry. I appreciate the opportunity. So what I thought I would do is, one, set a little bit of context about how we got here, and then bring in Marianne and Patrick and Angela to have this conversation about kind of what's been going on with talent finance. And when I think about it, it really has been kind of a journey, because even in the original pilot, there was a strategy around aligning resources. And I think we've now come back to that, Jason, in many respects. And one way I think about it is, and as many folks know, one of my favorite visuals is the value stream, because I think this is a critically important part of how we should be thinking about talent finance, because the value stream is really that opportunity to be clear about where can we mitigate risks in terms of what's happening to an individual, what's happening with employers, what's happening with our educational institutions, to ensure that we're getting to the outcome that everyone's seeking, which is to help people navigate and get to an employer, because the employer needs a skilled worker or a set of skilled workers. And so if you think about that value stream and all the things that activities that take place at it, in that you can think about downside risks and upside opportunities where investment can take place. And so a lot of the work we've been doing in the talent finance space has been focused in understanding where's the risk and where are the upside opportunities, and how do you get people to share in the risk and the upside opportunities. Part of the conversation that Jason, Bob, and I were having, over the last couple of years has been really that when we put folks into kind of thinking about the skills they need to be successful, there are generally two people who take the risk. It's either the individual, and it's primarily the individual by getting student loans or some other way to get resources, to get the skills, to get to the employer, or it's the employer because they decide to do an apprenticeship program or other things. And so how do we think about how do we share across the risk in all of that? And that's really what led to this conversation. And when you think about what takes place when someone buys a home, there is a lot of risk sharing and mitigating of risk that takes place in that process. And that was part of why we had this conversation. And so it was really part of kind of working with Jason, working with Bob, working with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta and the great team there, that, we wrote this, this paper that really focused in on kind of, let's understand talent finance and how we may have to think about it differently. And as you can see on kind of this value stream piece of it, there are opportunities to mitigate risk by helping people understand what are the career options so that they can actually make a good choice about the programs they enter. And then when you think about all the career prep that's going, how do you kind of finance that in a proper way? And then when you get to an employer, what are the opportunities for the employer to kind of, assist in what they're getting out of a pipeline that has been designed to support them? And so in many respects, that's where we've been trying to build this. And, what we're about ready to do is bring in kind of the three folks from our cohorts, from our talent finance design workshop, who've been a part of that, because it showed up in multiple different ways in terms of how can we, have risk sharing between an education provider, an employer, and an individual using tools like income share agreements. There are other things which begin to move much more into kind of performance outcomes and outcomes-based funding that could fund other things. So we're just at the beginnings of this, and it's really exciting to be able to do this. But once again, this valued stream is where the co-designing of mitigating risk and making investments that support the positive outcomes we're trying to achieve show up. And so that's kind of setting the background. So I'd like to bring into the conversation now Patrick Leduc of Vermont Student Assistance Corporation, Angela Lambert from the Lubbock Chamber, and Marianne Sheehan from Vermont. Good morning, Marianne, you made it. And what I'd like to do is, provide them each kind of an opportunity to kind of talk about their involvement in the Talent Finance Initiative. If, Angela could go first, then we'll bring in Vermont to kind of share about that. And we'll do this in about 10 minutes, and then we're gonna have a conversation on some of the themes. So, Angela. You may be on mute, Angela.
Thanks for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity. So I finished up the TPM Academy last October, and the TPM Academy was a wonderful community of leaders from across the nation that I've been able to network with. And after completing the TPM Academy, then I was pretty much immediately introduced to the talent finance portion, which has been very eye-opening. I believe it will help us with our diversity and equity efforts. And I now see the importance of not only the students being involved in the financial component, but also the educational systems and other organizations, just as Peter kind of mentioned a few minutes ago. I believe that looking at these different funding options gives us more tools for our toolbox to help meet each individual's financial needs, because we're all different in our income levels and things of that sort. So these financing options seem to help break down the barrier. So higher education enrollment helps without placing those undue risks on the student borrowers. And I look at this as kind of being proactive rather than reactive to help benefit our community's need in locating and securing that talent.
So Marianne and Patrick, why don't you kind of share what's been going on in Vermont and how this has come into play for you all, and then we'll kind of have a discussion about what we've observed.
Yeah, so I'll start, and then I'll turn it to Patrick. I'll just say I've been working in Talent Pipeline for about 4 years now, and we've had a healthcare collaborative in place for more than 3 years. And that seems to represent our greatest need in our state. So that's where we've focused most of our efforts so far. And I'm just going to say the talent finance portion of this has been absolutely one of the most important parts of the talent pipeline work that I've been doing. And the reason for that is because, you know, we can identify what the problems are. We can even identify the solutions. But if we don't come up with some ways to put together funding for those solutions, the likelihood of them actually, you know, having an impact is going to be much, much smaller. So when Jason and Peter brought this to my attention, I was immediately excited by it. We had sort of been nibbling around the edges of this for a long time, and it just sort of opened my eyes up to all of the different things that we could be doing that we never even thought of. And, you know, in our project that Patrick and I worked on in the workshop, we were able to think outside the box that we had been in for a very long time. So I'm going to ask Patrick to explain some of the thoughts that we came up with that were introduced to us that we never had thought of before.
Thanks, Marianne, and a pleasure to be with all of you today. I really appreciate the invite to talk about this, and I will go back to what Peter said, is that we're really just at the beginning of this, trying to iterate new ideas and new ways of designing finance so that we can get more people through the pipeline more effectively. One of the groups that we're really focused on in our statewide organization, VJEC is a statewide nonprofit serving all the way from middle school through adults in every aspect. And working with Marianne in the talent pipeline allows us to kind of think about these solutions in new ways. And going through the talent finance initiative allowed us to hear all kinds of different ideas from different states and different providers. And it was really just a great iterative process to kind of think through. And I think we stole from just about everybody that spoke in different ways. One of the things that we are iterating right now is a way to rethink how employers look at tuition reimbursement programs within a collaborative. So traditionally, tuition reimbursement, as I'm sure you're all aware, is either the employer pays it up front or the employer reimburses the employee once a grade is received or whatever. The challenge with that is none of the individual benefits that we would braid in with an individual, such as state grant dollars, scholarship dollars, Pell Grant dollars, are into play when an employer is the financing mechanism. So we're trying to rethink how we can do all of that as a way to iterate financing for getting people into the healthcare collaborative process. The model really looks like the financing is now kind of born in some ways by the employee in a traditional sense, but the employer uses some of those tuition reimbursement dollars in a loan repayment kind of model. So the employer still does not pay for that unless they bail out or terminate their employment, which is a challenge for employers because they have to claw back money and they have tax issues with reporting and things like that. The mechanism that we're trying to iterate in that risk model that Peter was talking about is if we can reduce the total cost of education for the employer, because we're bringing in all this other braided funding that is not going to be real cost now, can we get them to take some of that seed money put it in what we're calling a stacked recyclable fund that could be state dollars, this collaborative dollars, some philanthropic, maybe some career focused people. And then we recycle that funding over time to keep retraining new people. And everybody's kind of engaged in that process. So we're trying to reinvent tuition reimbursement into a more modern model.
No, and that's helpful. And Patrick, if you could explain just a little bit about what, kind of a state assistance, commission does, because I think that would be helpful for folks to understand. Because I think one of the things you actually do, because you talk about 8th grade through others, is you counsel folks to think about what careers so they make good choices, which is a de-risking approach. But just give folks a sense of, kind of why this is important and where they might find similar to you in their states.
Yeah, that's a great point, Peter, because looking at the slide that you presented, I definitely see between TPM and our organization, we're playing on that entire spectrum in various ways. And so that's a huge value for us. We'll start working with students in counseling them around career and college planning in middle school. And we'll work with them, depending on which program they're in, all the way through into college. And then sometimes when they come out of college, or if they don't make it to college, we'll counsel them as adults to get them into these programs. So we have lots of ability as a nonprofit. We also administer the 529 plan. We administer a state loan program, the state grant program. We help with the guarantor function, and we administer scholarships. So we are kind of like the independent source across the state of Vermont, providing all of that. And we are starting to slowly partner with businesses, even without the financing piece, to add a benefit into employers around career and college planning for their employees themselves and their employees' kids, because we just need more eyes on this very complicated world of financing education, right? And so that's our mission. And that mission tied with the workforce efforts with TPM is a really nice fit. And there is a ton of other kind of state-based nonprofit organizations in most states that, and I think 4 or 5 were part of the Talent Finance Initiative.
Now, so folks know they should be beginning to connect with partners like you. That's why I wanted to do that. So let's start up the conversation we said we would have, and we'll kind of target getting to, maybe 11, depending what time zone you're in, kind of 11:50-ish, 10:50-ish Central Time, to give folks time for questions. Mary Ann, Patrick, Angela, one of the things we'd like to know is how have kind of the talent finance innovations been integrated into your talent, TPM efforts, and how has, participating enhanced your thinking about how talent finance, can accelerate your TPM efforts. So it's kind of this general reason. What has this meant for you all?
So I now have new ways to help offer funding to students during the process, and have ways to engage the employers to have more skin in the game. And these alternative funding options have helped with they will help with our diversity, equity, and inclusion piece that we're trying to incorporate, as well as other companies are in our area. So.
And you're also in the beginning, so you actually have the opportunity to integrate it at the beginning, right, Angela?
Yes.
So Mary Ann?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because I'll just say I've known and worked with Patrick for a lot of years, and we never worked on talent pipeline or finance before. We've overlapped in so many other ways, we never even thought of this. So I feel like the ability to actually learn something about talent finance, but to come into it with a partner like Vermont Student Assistance Corporation is a real value add to any thinking that you're doing about how to finance talent. We came up with solutions that are much better than 1 + 1. If either one of us had thought through some of this stuff on our own, it would not have had the value. So coming into it with your partners is probably a really good thing to do.
And Patrick, feel free to interject, but it does sound like there's this opportunity that TPM brings employers in a way that you probably don't have access to, but you also bring kind of the financial thinking to the table that in many respects could be helpful. Does that make, am I off base on that?
No, I think that's a really a perfect analogy. And I think also we also have, because of the nature of the work that we do and most of my peers across the country, we have really strong relation with all the education providers as well. So we really can knit those things together with TPM in a way that I think, as Marianne just said, is kind of puts it on steroids to some degree.
Yeah.
But you are, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, and Patrick talked about, rethinking tuition reimbursement. I mean, that was like, here we have all these employers and they've been doing it this way, in a traditional way, for so long. And is it working for them? Sometimes, sometimes not. I think it's sort of one of those things hanging in the background that people don't really talk about or think about unless it's, required. But how could we rethink it to be more proactively used in places where they need the help? That's the new thinking that goes along with this.
And I think that's also the other piece is it has generally been used much more for those that already have a good college education to get additional college education, not necessarily for the bulk of the workforce that's strategically important to them as well. And so I think that's part of what was interesting in the conversations we were having.
Yes.
So also, since I've learned about the fact of bringing in the educational institutions like our community college, I've shared that information with my contact there about the income share agreements, just to kind of get them on the page, because they will be a part of that possibly. And then it's been very good to work with Lubbock Economic Development Alliance to give me new ideas about how that funding works, and as well as with Workforce Solutions South Plains. So we've all come together to look at these different opportunities to hopefully help fund that talent.
And we'll put something in the chat toward the end, but part of the talent finance work, we also partnered with the Society for Human Resource Management to do a survey. And so next week we'll be kind of sharing some of the high level findings of that survey and how it plays into talent finance around kind of this whole notion of benefits. I mean, and as you think about this, and Angela and Marianne and Patrick have suggested that, how has your thinking changed about the critical partners you're going to have to bring to the table that may be different than we've had traditionally as part of TPM? And then how do we kind of, think about this almost as what's the pitch and the value proposition for bringing those partners to the table? Because we've generally made the pitch of, we're going to get you better talent. Now we're talking about, we're going to get you better talent. We're going to think differently about how to invest, how we should invest in that talent. Does that make sense as a question? Kind of, what's our value proposition and what's the pitch to get additional critical partners to the table, and who are they?
To me, I think it's a cohesive system rather than just the student getting the loan, and we bring everyone together to the table to see, and when I say everyone, I mean like Workforce Solutions, members of the healthcare. We are starting a healthcare collaborative, and so bringing the members of the collaborative together, also with the EDA people, and also possibly credit unions. They have different funding ideas, flexibility, rather than just the student taking out a loan and that's it. These new talent finance solutions have like a wraparound service. So they have these extra benefits for the student, like counseling, mentorship. And then when they get out, they're not in debt necessarily. They pay an income portion of their income back.
And maybe before we get into that, maybe we should at least let folks know what an income share agreement is, because we're throwing it around like everybody knows what it is. And we spent a lot of time in the design workshop to kind of say, here are some innovations. So an income share agreement is a different approach to a student loan. It's much more like an equity investment in an individual that sets kind of a repayment percentage of your salary once you hit a certain threshold of making money. And it could be more than is actually provided to you if you're, if it's assumed that at $100,000 a year, you're going to repay it in 3 years. If you make 120,000, you're actually going to pay a little more into the fund than not. So it's not technically a loan. It's based on kind of the performance and the outcome. And there are usually guardrails to it in terms of there's a threshold floor before you start repaying. And then there's kind of a maximum that you would actually end up repaying, usually in kind of 1.5 or 150% of what was advanced to you. And so that's kind of, it's a different approach. Purdue uses it. We heard a great example from the San Diego Workforce Board in terms of how they use it as I think Angela said, another tool in their toolkit in terms of how they do that. So that's how income share agreements, and it's much more kind of related on the performance and the outcome. And you see a lot of this also in kind of the coding academies where they know, and they've done a lot of de-risking up front, that folks are going to be successful so they can advance kind of the tuition that will get repaid once they start with their employers. I'm sorry, Mary Ann, but Patrick, we were kind of just throwing this terminology out without folks understanding it.
No, I appreciate that. I think going back to your core question, I think one of the things that I think is a selling point for what the model that we're trying to get employers to buy into is it really does kind of start spreading the risk out a little bit, because in the tuition reimbursement model that most of them use, they own the risk, right? They're paying usually the full boat, and they have to administer it. And then if an employee leaves or it doesn't work out, they're still stuck with that debt, or they've got to try to find some way to claw that back from someone that probably left their employment. In this model, our goal is that, to me, it's a straightforward conversation. We're going to reduce your total cost, and we're going to reduce your risk in managing the remaining cost. And for that, we wanted an investment to kind of have a recyclable fund along with other players. To me, that seems like a pretty compelling place to start the conversation.
Anything to add, Mary Ann?
Well, on that subject, no, I think that was a great description. Yeah. No,
and and this whole notion where Angela was going in terms of credit unions, and Vermont has been very innovative in how it uses its credit unions to provide low dollar loans to actual employees who may need something like $750 to get a car repair. And their only equity or their collateral is the fact that they have a job with an employer that's participating in the program. So very innovative stuff in terms of how you think about a credit union, similar to Patrick's organization. It's a nonprofit that serves its members. And so they think very differently about what kinds of benefits they can work on. So anything else? And then we're going to kind of get to the last piece of it, of what were some of the takeaways. Mary Ann, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to give an example of how we think we can use this, just so people can sort of picture it in their heads. We're thinking about funding entry-level positions, training for entry-level positions, and for those who qualify for, nursing training, we would be advancing them through apprenticeship and other funding models so that there's no cost to the individual to actually get, a stepped training program that would give them first 14 credits in a health sciences core. If they're successful at that, then they could apply those to a 35 credit practical nursing degree. And if they're successful at that, they can apply it to a 60 credit RN ADN associate's degree. So those are things that we're thinking through. How could you do this with no cost at all to the consumer? I think that we could do it. So that's sort of the thought process. We could be more inclusive and diverse in our populations that are entering into those entry-level positions. We can even work with employers to provide retention bonuses for, if you've been working at least 32 hours a week in a job like that and going through education while you're working, we can put those things in place without there being any cost to the individual. So those are sort of our thoughts on how to finance.
That also kind of raises the importance of why TPM, because if we're trying to design that, they've got to be flexible enough in terms of how they deploy their workforce, so that if someone's going for education, it's, you know, structured into how they create the workday or create, you know, kind of how people work. So that's the other piece in terms of why the employer collaborative becomes important to this. So as we kind of close it out, and I want to remind folks, we're going to, you know, have 10 or 15 minutes of questions, so you can put them in the chat, or, you know, certainly we can engage in the conversation. So the last one is, we're going to kind of go back to the design workshop. What was your biggest takeaway? How do you think about what challenges you're going to confront? And do you have any advice? Because I see, you know, a whole stream in here where, you know, as we do this next one, you know, what would be your advice to folks in the National Learning Network if they were considering the talent finance kind of workshop?
Mine would be, bring your VSAC. Bring your finance partner with you, and you will both benefit incredibly from the experience. But my big takeaway was, your solutions are only so good until you figure out how to finance them. So, you know, we can think through how to make this happen, but if we don't have a way to finance it, it's not going to happen.
And I would just add to what Marianne said. I appreciate the bring your VSAC with you, but I think, you know, all the players that were in this first cohort of talent finance, I mean, there were so many ideas and so many different ways of looking at these problems. You couldn't help but come away with ideas that were really intriguing. I think from a takeaway, one of the major ones that wasn't in our minds initially was this idea of a stackable and recyclable fund. That definitely came out of some of the conversations with the peers in that group. And that, for us, was a game changer in how we designed this and how we thought it was going to be a value proposition. And related to the challenges part of your question, that's also one of the bigger challenges. How do you structure that in a way that risk is appropriately shared? And how do you make the system so simple? Because we are putting more complexity into the process in our design, but we've got to find a way to simplify that so it does get utilized, because the more complicated it is, the more it's not going to get utilized.
Angela, any pieces of advice? And then we'll open it up.
No, I agree with Marianne. What I did is I brought in, we're partnering with Lubbock Economic Development Alliance. And so Christine helped me see some pieces of the puzzle I didn't understand. And also we reached out to our workforce solutions people and had them join us in the talent finance design workshop as well.
Yeah, and that's another critical partner, because there are other critical partners that, you know, the chamber has partnered with, in addition to SHRM, which we think is critically important because it brings that business voice into it. We've also partnered with the National Association of Workforce Boards, because we believe, you know, once again, this braided funding that's going to be necessary is going to be critical to kind of figure out how to make it simpler so that you're not having all these buckets. And then the final one was the Education Finance Council, which is, you know, it's a member-based organization, and Patrick's a member of that. And so it's all these assistance corporations that are doing that. And we've also, you know, added an organization called Social Finance that has been trying to think about, you know, how are we actually working in kind of this social impact space. I think, you know, they've been very innovative in the social impact bond question area. And then we've also obviously spent some time and with a great partner, Jane Oates at Working Nation, to kind of continue to elevate it and document the good practices. So those are some of the things that are out there in terms of why we've partnered and who are the partners you should be thinking about. We're also thinking about financial product development. So how do we get banks and credit unions and others that think about financial products, think about how do you risk manage or other pieces to that. So any questions, please feel free to kind of put that out there. And I see one that I'm looking at right now, but feel free to add others. So we had a question about whether business and funders manage risk as to who they're investing in. Do they do any determination of who might be successful candidate for this funding? And if so, are there equity implications? And I think that's a great question. Yes. I mean, when you think about kind of how you might de-risk up front, which is understand, is someone likely to be successful going through that program, but then how do we ensure folks have the right set of supports to do that? I don't know if you want to add to that, but it's in many respects, you do a mortgage application for a reason, which is to help someone make a determination. Patrick, did you have?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I missed most. I froze up for a second there. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, I mean, in many respects, there's this idea of, whether business or funders manage risk by who they're investing in. Do they do any determination of who might be a successful candidate for this kind of funding? And if so, are there equity implications?
Yeah, I'm not aware of the model in Vermont right now where that is happening. I think it is, anybody that's willing, can get the loan and can pay the bills, can show up in the classroom, right? And that's sometimes as much as an equity issue as the opposite. Our counselors work pretty diligently with the students that we work with to try to get them into the right place. And it's a delicate balance between, taking someone's dream away, but also saying that's not realistic for where you are right now. But the change in the financing model that we're looking at definitely is going to require us to put some questions up front in that process to determine whether somebody will be successful or not. And then really track them, as Marianne was saying, through those various steps to see that they're still on track and not put them in a position where, especially when the financing now is tied to them individually as opposed to the employer, that they're putting themselves at too much risk.
And Deb, I'm going to ask you to kind of come off mute to share some insights. But before you do that, because I want to add another kind of dimension to how to think about risk. And one of the disruptors in this space has been Guild Education in terms of how they partner with employers to administer tuition assistance benefits, primarily for their entry-level kind of frontline workers. And I think one of the ways they de-risk it is by a fairly sophisticated kind of coaching capability that not only kind of works with the individuals, but helps them make good choices for what fits for them and what fits for their career. And so I think that's another piece to this whole point of how do we de-risk and think about equity. Deb.
Thanks, Peter. No, I would offer, for those that don't know me yet, well, I spent 17 years as an HR executive in financial services. So this whole concept really resonated with me the minute I heard about it. We in Minnesota, Real-Time Talent, are still relatively new with TPM, but we are finally to the point where our nursing assistant collaborative, Marianne, your comments spoke to me, right? We're finally co-designing with preferred partners and getting into that work. And Patrick, you just said it spot on, right? Without employers having the financial expertise that the educators and others bring to bear when they're trying to train workers, it's hard. And so I was asked to participate in design cohort 1 for talent finance, way excited, couldn't get my finance partners or my community college partners, which I have very close relationships, to come to the table. And they had said to me, tell us what you learn. So, okay, I went, right? I wanted to get in and learn about this. I could see potential. But now I'll just tell you, trying to convey the big lessons learned, to your point, Patrick, the things none of us even know to ask as that brainstorming was going on collectively, it's really difficult. And furthermore, to be more specific, what I'm running into, and some of you that work with education and the financing pieces there will know what I'm saying, I'm being met with the classic defense mechanism, which is, yeah, but if somebody actually makes a lot of income through their program, they could in fact have to pay more than a traditional student loan. If you model this out, look how Purdue is doing it. Look how, and so I'm not the financial expert, and I kind of run into that dead end, right? So I would just really encourage you, if you're going to do a talent finance design cohort, and I would applaud that we all do. I think it's hugely helpful. You need to have your partners with you to really be successful and accelerate quickly. I'm still optimistic. I'm still working it, but that's just another reality and an example to share.
And I think, and Patrick, you can disabuse me of this, but I think bringing someone like a Patrick to the table actually has education listen differently, because right now our only value proposition for education to listen differently is I'm bringing a set of employers. But now you're bringing someone who actually helps individuals get into those institutions. And so Patrick, it would be helpful if you shared a little bit about why that piece is important, because you bring us another set of leverage to bring those folks to the table, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the little bit, first thing that comes to mind, Peter, is what we said earlier, right? The system is just really complex. In an ideal world, you wouldn't need the people that we have out in the field helping people navigate all of this stuff and filling out the forms and understanding that you got to know that you can get money over here or you can get money over there, or you should apply here. The system is just so complex. We've got an army of people out there helping people navigate that. And that's really one of the goals that we have, is how can we find a way to simplify this so that it works better for everyone involved? But that's what comes to mind, Peter, in your question.
No, and I think that's going to take time. And I think this whole issue of inequity shows up in multiple different ways. Partly when you think about the disparate impact of folks that may start in a community college, may not complete, and still have debt when they walk out. Yeah, it was another dimension of the inequity. And so how are we building that more seamless system, making the investment in the tools that are going to be necessary for that?
Right. And I'll add, Peter, I think one of the things, and this is to me like the next iteration of if we can get success in the model we're talking about in Vermont, one of the next iterations is once we build that infrastructure and we get employers thinking about using those dollars differently, and we've built them a system where they can do their loan repayment benefit or bring one into bear, you can actually now, as an employer, if you have people you want to bring in early, you could reach into the college ranks and you could pre-hire almost somebody and say, I'm going to start taking care of you now because I need you to be successful, right? So we can even reach deeper into those people that are training for the workforce sooner if we put this in place.
No, and that's helpful. And I think the other piece that showed up in talent finance and continues to show up in the work that Jason and others are doing with T3 and some other pieces is data is going to be critically important in this. You know, in a former life, I worked for Fannie Mae, and data is how they make, you know, credit score decisions and a bunch of other things. Bias can show up in that. They've begun to think about alternatives to get past that, but we do need to think about how are we also building out a better data infrastructure to help folks understand, here are the pathways that navigate into those things. Here are the capabilities you're going to need to be successful so that you're actually setting yourself up for success. And I think that's going to be a critical part to this as well, because career coaching, career navigation in a period that is accelerating, you know, kind of the use of skills and the hybrids of skills that are coming together that aren't taught in the same program areas are going to be critically important. And we're going to have to find ways to de-risk that and ensure that the broader population's there. Any final points? Because I'm going to try not to have us one run over, but two, to probably give us a little time back so that, you know, we can continue to have this conversation. But any final questions from the audience, because you've got some great folks here to think about this. So I want to thank Marianne, Patrick, Angela, and Deb for kind of jumping, and particularly Deb for jumping in to kind of share these insights. But it is a great opportunity to begin thinking about, you know, what are the tools we're going to need in our toolkit in addition to the strategies that we've been using to do that. We had a really good example with the San Diego Workforce Board that I think we're going to document a little bit. And I think those are going to be critical tools as we come into the next part of talent finance, which is really how are we building a similar network so that there's sharing and learnings that are being shared with others. And any final points before kind of ending it and turning it back to Jamie and Nikki? So thank you. And Jamie, I'm going to turn it back to you, I believe.
Yes, thank you so much, Peter. And I echo Peter's gratitude for Marianne and Angela and Patrick, as well as Deb. But a huge thank you to you too, Peter, for all of your contributions, not just to the TPM network, but also to the talent finance work. We're, as I will always say, so lucky to have you as part of our network. So it's kind of amazing for us to be ahead of schedule, which means you even get an extra 2-minute break as before we transition into our breakout sessions on implementation stages. So before you run off, let me just give you a little bit of information as to how this is going to work. Most of you selected which breakout session you would like to go into during your registration, and others did it afterwards. If you did not get a chance to select, then you will be automatically placed into a room. If you need to change or have any issues, then please text Nikki at the phone number that is available on the screen, or you can direct chat her via the Zoom chat. We will automatically place you in that room. You don't need to do anything. And then we will bring you back to the main room before we get together for our next general session. One other note that I wanted to make is that we are lucky to have these facilitated conversations with some incredible moderators. 3 folks who are very well steeped in talent pipeline management and overseeing collaboratives, and are experts, of course, in the strategies in which they're leading conversations, but also the entire framework as a whole. Kim Kuchenbrod from Illinois, Joe Quick from Mayor and Mayor, and Lakeisha Miller from the Kentucky Chamber. Thank you all so much. I have planted some seeds with a couple of your colleagues. So in your breakout sessions, there will be 2 TPM practitioners who have deep experience in the strategies in which you're going to be talking about, and can kind of represent where they stand in implementation for those specific phases, and are going to share with the group. But these sessions really are meant to be a networking session. So while they will talk for a couple minutes on the front end, it's not necessarily a plenary in which the facilitated conversation will only be with those facilitators. We want everybody in that room to participate in the conversation. So Kim and Joe and Lakeisha will open those conversations up, transition to those kind speakers who are willing to share with the group, but then we'll open it up and want to make sure that everybody participates. So please speak up, please ask questions. There are no silly questions. Let's make sure that we get to learn from one another. So that will start at 12:05. Nikki is reminding us to not log off of Zoom during this break because it will bump you out of your breakout. So stick on Zoom, but feel free to step away, and we will see you at 12:05 for these conversations. And we are so grateful to be joined by 2 incredible TPM employer champions, Tanya Miller and Carla Thompson, who hail from Kentucky and Texas respectively, working in partnership with the Kentucky Chamber Workforce Center and the Greater Houston Partnership. We're thrilled that you all are joining us for this conversation. Luckily for you all, you'll get to hear from Jason Tishko, our fearless TPM leader, who will moderate the discussion. But we want to be sure that we leave some time for questions among the audience. So feel free to go ahead and start to add those questions in the chat as they come to you. But with that, I'll hand things over to Jason.
Thank you, Jamie. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to formally now introduce our 2 panelists for our Enhancing Employer Engagement session. As Jamie had indicated, we are joined by Carla Thompson, who's the Workforce Development Manager at Turner Industries Group, LLC, which is based out of Texas. And Carla works in partnership with Peter Beard from the Greater Houston Partnership, who leads the Upskill Houston Initiative. And Carla is part of the Petrochemical Manufacturing Collaborative. We are also joined by Tanya Miller, who's the Director of Human Resources with Primary Care Centers of Eastern Kentucky. Tanya works with Sarah Tracy in the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, and specifically as a participant in the Eastern Kentucky Healthcare Collaborative. So thank you both, Carla and Tanya, for joining us today, for offering us your time. We know it's valuable, and we really appreciate you joining us to speak to a national network of TPM practitioners who hope to learn a thing or two from your experience in TPM, and how you could help us all get better at engaging and partnering and serving employers who are part of the TPM initiative. So I was just going to start with an easy question and provide both Carla and Tanya an opportunity to just talk a little bit about their own experience with joining TPM and what their involvement to date has looked like. So just, a minute or 2 on that, and then I have a few questions I was going to work through. But Carla, maybe we can start with you. Just how'd you get to know TPM? How'd you get involved, and what would you like to start with? And then we'll move on to Tanya.
Well, my involvement has been through Upskill Houston. We have a great collaborative going on in the Houston region, helping people who are underemployed, unemployed, joining industry for the first time, looking for their pathways forward. We have decided in the construction industry that a pipe fitter is a pipe fitter and a carpenter is a carpenter. And instead of having 100 different training programs, let's all try to be on the same page. And it's been really exciting and very collaborative. And we're really, really thrilled with the way the process is moving forward.
looks like Jason may have froze, but he did just type into the chat, no small accomplishment in an unstructured labor market. So with that, thank you, Carla. If Tanya, you'd like to introduce yourself and kind of tell us a little bit about how you got involved in TPM.
Okay. I have been involved in TPM about 2 years, I guess. And honestly, I hadn't heard of it until our CEO walked in my office and he says, "Hey, I got a project for you." And when I learned about the project, I thought, you know, this is very needed because in healthcare, there's a regional shortage in nursing, and that's where our collaborative has really started, is looking at nursing. You know, it wasn't just our business, it was all Eastern Kentucky and all healthcare, whether it's hospital, long-term clinics. So we kind of found ourselves there and glad to be there out of necessity, because we were getting into a dangerous situation.
Well, and I think
both of you.
Please go ahead, Jason. Okay.
Yeah, but I have an unstable connection, so be prepared to jump back in. But thank you both for those opening remarks. I think you know, what we'd like to start with first is just diving a little bit into what you both kind of teed up, which is, you know, that opening pitch, getting folks to buy in. That is often one of the biggest challenges early on in TPM implementation, is to get an employer, a prospective employer, and a collaborative to see and understand what this is, to understand how it's different, and to say, yes, I'm in. I'm willing to at least give a few strategies a try, and to try something new to see if I get a different result. Anything you both Carla and Tanya, you can share just in terms of, you know, what was it about that initial engagement that worked, that clicked, that made you say, yes, this is something we want to be part of? You know, what was the magic that made it all come together for you?
I think in our case, it was absolute communication with client companies, saying, let's talk, let's all sit at the same table and talk together. And the conversation just grew and grew and grew from there, to where we started forming some task forces. And once those task forces were coming back with information that the clients agreed, yes, these are things we need to work on, then we got more contractor involvement. And Upskill Houston has been a huge part of bringing these groups together and having them all talk together, and figuring out what curriculum is important to use in the schools. And we really do support, the East Harris County Manufacturing Association is a big supporter of the NCCR curriculum as far as teaching young people in school. And that's the same curriculum that they're wanting their contractors to use to teach when we're trying to upskill workers. And it's really exciting to see what has happened here in just a couple years. And of course, COVID slowed us down a little, but we're all back at the table and getting renewed, and things are coming back together.
I think sorry.
Oh no, please go ahead.
I think in our situation, you know, and she kind of, one of the key points that I think has been a success, a true success measurement, is how willing all of our collaborative members have been to share experiences, to share what's worked for them, even though, you know, like I may be trying to get the same nurse or the same rad tech or you know, the same person out of this program as they are. It's been very refreshing, I think, to sit down with our community members, with the other people that really, you know, have the same vested interest as we do, to build that pipeline and to, you know, make this initiative not fluff, but have real meat to it, have real substance to it.
You know, one of the big things we're pushing in industry right now is written tests are important, but we are really pushing the hands-on side, the practical side. You're not a journeyman until you prove it. You're not a journeyman until you can show us that you actually know how to use that power tool properly. Being able to talk it and not just walk it is critical. Getting that point across to a lot of people has been very hard because it costs more money to train this way. But our schools, our colleges, our community partners are all 100% on board on making sure that these folks, as they're training, are getting that hands-on section. And for a lot of people, it's making a world of difference.
No, I would imagine that that's the case. Go ahead, Tanya.
That's a concept that was really kind of, I guess in a way, kind of foreign in healthcare, but that's something that we're really starting to grasp now as far as internships and so forth go. You know, job shadowing, internships, paid internships. So that's something that that we have recently added, and we're we're very excited about that.
That's fantastic to hear, and a very important kind of component of what we encourage in TPM is that demonstration, and how that demonstration is going to look a little bit different from industry to industry, from context to context. So for you all to be able to kind of band together as a group of employers and emphasize the need for that demonstration to your potential employees as well as the provider partners that you're working with makes a world of difference. So it's great to hear that you all have found that to be worthwhile. I'm curious for you all to tell us a little bit about the partnerships that you have with Upskill Houston and the Kentucky Chamber respectively, in terms of what that collaboration has looked like and the role that they played, and what kind of support you're looking for from those types of host organizations.
Well, with us, Upskill Houston has a construction sector where commercial contractors, industrial contractors can all sit in the same room and talk, because we share a workforce here in Houston. And one of the pluses to being in Houston is we do have a strong talent pipeline. But, the piece of that is not just talking about it, but sharing with all our community partners, how do these people get into our pipeline? And what do we need to do to engage our veterans, to engage our underemployed, to engage more women, to engage people that never would have thought of entering this industry. One of the hugest groups we work with in Houston is C3 and CMEF. C3 works more with the commercial end. The Construction Maintenance Education Foundation works with the industrial end, and getting people to be willing to train after work hours, to bring their skill set up. And people have to invest, and companies have to support. And we're really lucky that companies like Turner Industries see such a strong reason to upskill their employees. We don't want somebody to stay in entry-level job their entire career. We want to see career progression. And that's one of the things we're trying to show people, is that you don't have to work at a $16 an hour job your entire life. You can enter an industry, and you may have to take a small step back to take steps forward, but the construction industry offers that wonderful pathway to so many different opportunities. But you have to have the training and the companies willing to move people up and then create more of these entry level jobs for people. And that's where we're pushing right now, is to get more entry level openings. There are companies out there that only want to hire journeyman pipe fitters. Well, if you're only willing to hire journeyman, what happens when that guy retires? Do you think that those pipe fitters are going to keep falling from the sky? And they're not. So having those internships, having those apprentice programs, having those programs where you send, like Turner does, where we send our helpers and our laborers to school 2 nights a week for almost 2 years to learn a pathway, is what's going to make the difference in making sure our workforce stays strong. And we are really excited to be at the forefront of that, along with Upskill Houston and making that happen here in this region.
Thanks so much, Carla. And how about for you, Tanya?
I mean, she's dead on. That's what we have learned too, is that you know, it's easy to get the entry level, but and back to nursing, like the natural progression is, you know, you're an aide, you're CNA, and then, you know, you go on to be a licensed nurse. And as we were looking at, you know, why CNAs, we can hire them all day long, but why aren't they going to that next step and to the next step? And you know, so we started identifying barriers. Single mothers, single fathers, transportation issues. Honestly, can they afford to step out of a low-paying job and to go to school full time? We've you know, identified barriers and then put things in place to address those barriers. And as we started identifying barriers, we started looking at other community agencies that help address those. So we brought those folks into the fold, and you know, our partnership just continued to grow and to blossom, and where we identified problems, now we have partners that are identifying solutions, and it's made for a, you know, a very productive group.
Thank you both for those responses, and my apologies for my technical difficulties, but thank you, Jamie and team, for stepping in as needed. I did have another question before we get into the Q&A, but one of the things we often hear early on in Strategy One is, you know, it's one thing to get the employers interested, engaged, and bought in. It's another to get them to take that next step then of actually going through the process of working with peers and potentially even competitors to begin to share data, as well as strategy. So I didn't know if both of you could address that point of view as from a company's perspective, coming into the TPM process and saying, okay, we hooked you on, you know, why this is urgent and why you need to be part of this. But now we're going to ask you to start sharing things you might not have shared in a forum like this before. And that takes trust. And you're going to be potentially commingling your data and your talent pipeline with others. Any perspective you could give on what that interaction was like for you, that experience for you, and what made it work for you to say, yes, I'm willing to take that extra step, to go that extra mile. And this is how you're thinking about it from a company's perspective, because we're really trying to understand, how do we meet you where you're at in that moment? So we better know how to engage you and make that a more trusted experience rather than raising a bunch of red flags. So anything, Carla and Tanya, you can add just on what it's like working with those peers or competitors and how we can make it better or a more trusted experience early on.
Well,
I think that was,
go ahead, Tanya.
sorry.
Go ahead, Tanya.
I think that was one of the things that I've enjoyed the most is having that interaction with the peers, and I think it all stems from the tone and the atmosphere that's set at the beginning of the whole process. You know, everybody has a place at the table. Everybody is encouraged, and everybody is listened to. So I think it all stems from, you know, at the very beginning, the tone and the atmosphere that's created in that very first meeting.
Absolutely. I agree with that 1,000%. And the other piece is having companies like Turner Industries that are willing to take a lead and being willing to stand up and say, we want to be part of this partnership. And then other companies will look at Turner and say, if they can do it, we can do it. And if they're doing it, let's do it with them. So, you know, we're very active at Turner with the Associated Builders and Contractors. We're very active with Upskill Houston. We're very active with Petrochem Works. And Mr. Goloczewski sits on those boards. Mr. Toops sits on the Upskill Houston board. He's the president of our company. So we have leaders that say, there is value here, and we are going to block the time. And it's time. It's always, can you find the time? Well, every company can find time for something that's important. People like Peter Beard, who's a great leader here in Houston, really make sure that the time that we give to him is there's value to it, and he doesn't waste our time. But it's, you know, it's all about leading the way, showing how a true collaboration can work. And when you do that, other companies are willing to step in behind. But the other piece that makes a difference is having client companies that say, we see value in this, and this is what we want our contractors. So, you know, we're a contractor company. We're not a client company, but we work for great clients that want us to be engaged and want us to be involved. And we've learned so much from each other just by sitting at the same table and talking. It's the last 2 years have been incredible. Last 3 years have been just incredible here in Houston, as far as more collaborative training and collaborative committees, and trying to all work under the same umbrella instead of 14 different umbrellas.
I remember when we first started exploring TPM as a concept back in 2014, and we were doing some initial roundtables with employers and other stakeholders just about the idea of taking a talent supply chain management approach and what we're asking employers to do differently. And I remember a lot of folks came back and just kind of had this built-in assumption about this ecosystem that companies won't do it. They will not engage with peers and competitors. It's a collective action problem that's not going to be solved but for government. And they will not share proprietary workforce data. And I think it's just been an incredible learning journey these past few years. And here we have two great examples of companies who've really stood up and said, no, if given the space, the incentive, the forum, we will not only engage, but we will lead. And we will show you how it's done. So really excited to continue to learn from your experience, because it's so critical to the long-term success of not only this initiative and framework, but this network. And there's so much more we still need to learn. You know, one of the areas we're going to be diving deeper into is learning more about how to do TPM from the employer perspective for those employers that do kind of want to go it alone or who are uniquely positioned, to lead in their community. And as we do that, trying to figure out how we could better support more direct to the employer, how to organize that conversation internally. So that it's not just, we can't expect any one person to kind of show up and have all the answers out the gate. In a collaborative, there's a lot of pieces in the framework that require you to go back and do your homework, not only across the collaborative, but inside of a company. So how to support that conversation inside of a company, I think is going to be another big step for us. So before we bring on the first question, I know that wasn't one that we had prepared for, but Carla or Tanya, any thoughts you have on what we can do as the TPM movement and host organizations to better prepare individuals like yourselves to manage that conversation internally? Any advice for us before we open it up to the audience?
I think just keep encouraging it. Just keep encouraging it. Because, sometimes a company says, no, I'm not going to do that. But then leadership changes. And just because they said no a year ago or 2 years ago, doesn't mean that the current leader is going to say no too. I get accused sometimes of being a bulldog because I don't give up on things. When I think something is important, I just keep asking and keep trying. And I think that's one of the things that having people like an organization like Upskill Houston, which sits just to keep encouraging and to keep asking questions and to keep looking for input and to keep looking for people to get involved makes all the difference in the world.
In the data collection part of it, and I guess that was probably the most time intensive part that we as employers had. But I reached out to department managers and got them involved and told them what it was, what we were doing, why it was important, and just kind of got them involved, got their ideas. And I think the more people you involve in an organization and get behind it, the better it's going to be.
That's great. We often talk about, we have the TPM orientation, which is all about, before you jump into the 6 strategy framework, you got to kind of, make sure that the ground is ready, which means a lot of conversations with a lot of different stakeholders. So everybody knows what's about to happen and is bought in and is supportive. So you don't have to go back. And we know that's so important, particularly for host organizations that are going to organize an employer collaborative. But I think where we probably have some work to do as a network is to really dive into that orientation from the company's point of view, to say, okay, well, once the head of a company says, I'm in, and once they identify a leader like Carla or Tanya to say, all right, you need to go represent our interests and get this done, how can we do more table setting inside the company itself so everybody's on the same page, particularly for those larger companies or OEMs? So you're not just knocking on doors trying to force a conversation that somebody doesn't want to have, but everybody's on the same page in terms of, we know what's coming, we know when you're going to come to us, we know what you're going to ask from us and what the expectation is. And to the chamber team, I would just say, I think as we're moving to this next iteration of TPM and diving into this curriculum, I think it would serve us well to explore the employer perspective from an orientation point of view. But I just wanted to thank you, Carla and Tanya, both of you, for not only your engagement in today's session, but your contributions to the field writ large, and for sharing this experience you've had both in Houston as well as in Eastern Kentucky. Thank you for being those champions. And we hope to continue to leverage your engagement well into the future as we aid and abet this economic recovery. So Jamie, I'm going to come back to you and say, have we gotten any questions or anybody we want to prompt from the audience to join the conversation?
Yeah, I was hoping that Sarah could elaborate on what she shared in the chat about her working with this healthcare collaborative, since she was kind enough to bring Tanya to our family.
Sure. Yeah, I found it very interesting. It was very early on. I'll never forget this. We've rotated our meetings. Each of the companies have kind of hosted our meetings on their sites, which I've loved kind of that part of the process. So they each kind of get to highlight one another and tour and those kind of things. But it was really interesting. It was after a collaborative meeting as we were wrapping up. And we have two really large hospital systems as a part of this collaborative, who I see as, I like to call them the Titans. I call it Clash of the Titans sometimes. But they have worked so well together. And I found it interesting that very early on, at the end of a meeting, I saw the two kind of counterparts that were representing each talking afterward, and just in passing, I heard them saying, oh, well, what are you offering when you hire someone, like hiring bonuses and recruitment strategies? And are you doing tuition assistance? And they were just openly, it wasn't even part of the meeting anymore. We were walking out the door sharing those kind of things. And that, not just among them, but that has been a practice within this collaborative probably since meeting 2 or 3. It really just, they really have just collaborated so well. And to hear specifics like that so early on, I was just shocked. And I think that's where, in a way, I knew this group is going to be a leader in this work. They're going to be an example in what they do. And they've proven that every step of the way in what they've done. So yeah, thanks, Tanya, for being here. You're amazing. And just proud to work with this collaborative every day.
Thank you for sharing that, Sarah. It's something that we embedded in the newest version of the curriculum, version 4, that was recently released, was based on input we received from the Kentucky Chamber about how to understand the dynamic that's happening with those collaboratives and the interesting types of collaborations that can result well beyond even implementation of the TPM framework. So something we tried to be more intentional about is setting expectations in our training that, yes, you want to execute the framework and you want to accomplish that mission and deliver that ROI. But at the same time, when you bring employers together, magic happens. And much like we talk in our circles here in the TPM National Learning Network, that it's all about the network, the power of the network and the collaboration and peer exchange that result therein. It's the same with the employer collaboratives. The more we get them together and giving them a space to talk and engage one another on issues related to or outside of TPM, that too is a win. You brought them together, you built that trusted network, and you want to track those wins. So you want to make sure I always say, don't be too slavish to the framework. We want to execute it. You need to make it work for you. But at the same time, to the extent that you could use that networking moment to get them to surface new ways and opportunities to engage in the community, it's a great thing. And that is often a service unto itself as a group of professionals learning and supporting one another in their community of practice. So Thank you for sharing that. I know we're getting close to time, but did anyone else have a question? Was anything raised, Jamie?
Yes, Joe Quick has a question if you want to unmute yourself, Joe.
Yeah, so thanks, Jamie. I was kind of thinking about, along the lines of this conversation, some healthcare work that I was involved in where, and I mentioned this in the chat a little bit earlier, but thinking about how the collaborative members kind of came together not only to solve challenges within their own industry, but also to kind of discuss, I think to Sarah's point of those conversations kind of happening after the meeting about, what are you doing to attract people? What do your packages look like? That kind of thing, to compete against other industries. So for instance, in this case, the like entry level or mid-level healthcare occupations were paying a similar wage to entry level occupations in the finance industry, like with the banking industry. And there was a huge presence in this region of the finance industry. And so not only were they kind of, the healthcare collaborative members kind of figuring out, what do we need to do to address our own issues, but how are we going to elevate our industry and compete against other industries for similar wage levels of occupation. So I'm wondering if either of you have had experience with that in your work in collaboratives, where you've kind of banded together to think of strategies to attract people into the industry in a competitive way against other industries, if that makes sense.
I'm thinking, we spend a lot of time with the underemployed and school and students in schools, talking to them about what we do. And they'll, when you talk to a kid in high school, they all want to be engineers. Okay. And they all want to be project managers. But getting them to understand that you can't just get there, you have to learn something along the way. And our industry is a good place for them to learn and even to support themselves while they're trying to go to school, to do other things. And, one of the great things about construction is when you step on a construction site, the people, we have preachers and we have musicians and we have audio engineers and we have people that do a lot of other things besides just industrial construction. It's kind of exciting to see, but we're not trying to steal people from anywhere, but we are trying to make sure that folks take their blinders off when they're trying to figure out what they want to do. And that's at all ages. I mean, I didn't start off in workforce development. I came from education and I loved my job in education, but this job sure pays a lot more. But I wouldn't have this job if I hadn't had that background, and trying to get people to see that there are so many places that they can start somewhere and end somewhere else, and not to be afraid to try. I don't know if that plays into, I'm just trying to figure out how to.
No, I love those comments, Carla. That's great.
So Danny, I want to give you the final word before we transition to our next segment. Anything else you want to add with respect to Joe's question, or just any final thoughts for our audience today?
Well, I guess in kind of in reference to his question, one of the things that we're really looking at now, and probably one of the next steps will be to really take a look and start working with K through 12. Because like Carla said, everybody wants to be an engineer. Well, a lot of people want to be nurses or want to be in healthcare until they get there. And it's very sad. School is very expensive. It's a big time commitment to go through school. And then once you get on the floor, you think, gosh, I've made a mistake. I really don't like this. So kind of the next step we feel in making and building that successful and building that talent pipeline is to identify those students, give them the exposure they need to really commit to the healthcare field, and make sure that we give them enough exposure so they can make an informed decision. Is this really what I want to do?
And that's one of the great things about career and technical education is a child can take something in high school and then realize this is not where I want to go. So having these introductory courses in career and technical education make all the difference in the world in helping them also see, like I said, take the blinders off. You know, it's not all about welding. There's so much more out there, and we want you to look past it.
I wanted to thank both of you, Carla and Tanya, for joining us today. We've learned a great deal from you, and just wanted to really celebrate your leadership in your respective communities and your contributions to the TPM movement. On behalf of the U.S. Chamber, just thank you for giving this framework a chance and for working with our partners in the field. And there's just so much more we can learn from you. So you will likely hear from us again. But we do appreciate your time this afternoon and sharing your story with us. And we hope you can stick around for the rest of the segment. But if you need to go, I just want to say thank you. And hopefully we'll have opportunities to further engage you in the TPM family going forward. And with that, I will pass things back to Jamie.
Thank you so much, Jason. And I echo his gratitude both to Tanya and Carla, as well as to Peter and Sarah for the introductions and your contributions to their work. And of course, they're two incredible leaders, part of two incredible organizations, but we're glad to have you. So the last session that we have today are the very, very popular industry spotlights. So we're so grateful to the colleagues who have offered to join us for these conversations. Laura Ward, Tammy Ford, and Angela Robbins for construction, Nan Pham and Kate Gallagher for information technology, Dexter Sullivan and Sarah Tracy for emerging industries. And then for those of you who elected to stay in the general session, you'll be joined by Nikki and Jason. We don't have any kind of formal facilitation for these breakout sessions. They are, again, meant to be a great opportunity for colleagues to connect. So you'll get to hear from these colleagues, but then we want to open it up for discussion and allow for you all to have that networking opportunity. So again, you don't need to do anything, and then we'll bring you back to the main room when it's time for us to come together for our final group discussion, but looking forward to these breakouts. So thank you again to our colleagues, and we will see you soon.
Okay. So if you were on our last quarterly webinar, you might have seen some of this before, but we wanted to make sure to still provide you all an update on TPM Next, which is kind of just the name for the overall initiative and project that we've been working on and kind of iterating what the next life cycle of the TPM Academy would be. And what we've heard a lot from practitioners and others that want to be involved in this is needing the opportunity to be able to have more access to this framework. And so that is why we're looking at bringing TPM online on demand so that more people could participate in this and kind of learn at their own pace and have this opportunity to build an online community, collaborate together, and innovate. So TPM CoLab is going to be that space, and this is going to, allow for people to be able to learn the framework, get additional training in our extension resources, and be able to engage with your TPM peers online. So there will be 3 tracks to this TPM CoLab. We'll have one for host organizations, which if you've gone through in a TPM Academy or you're currently in one right now, you know that the TPM framework as it currently stands is really focused towards those host organizations, those people who are going to be playing that guiding role for employer collaboratives. But we recognize that there's the opportunity and the desire from our other partners to really understand what it means for them to be a part of the TPM process, so that we want to make sure that when our employer partners or those who are part of an employer collaborative are learning about the framework, that we're able to kind of give them that perspective of what it means for them, as well as our provider partners. So there will be a track for each type of role within the TPM process. We'll have extension modules as well. As you may know, that we had 2 curriculum extensions, one in CTE and one in opportunity populations, and we'll be building those into the online trainings as either a supplement to your TPM Academy experience online, or as an additional training or continued learning after you've gone through a TPM Academy. And as I mentioned, there will be those additional features of online communities, dynamic resources and templates, and preferred partner tools. The other component of this is the opportunity for this to be a credentialed platform, and for you to really have something tangible and professionalizing your experience through the TPM Academy. And actually, Joe Quick, who is on this call, is helping us with developing a peer review process, and that will be in conjunction with some of our other TPM faculty and fellows. And then finally, just to give you an overview of the timeline for this project, we are still working on developing the modules. We just did our first prototype testing, and thank you to those who were on the call that participated in that. That was over our Unit 3.2. We'll be doing our next prototype of the full Strategy 3 in August, and then we'll have our first full program pilot within the tool in the first quarter of 2022. So if you are interested, or you know of those who might be interested to participate in one of our pilot programs, please let us know. We plan on having the full launch to the public by Q3 of 2022. And that is it for me, and I will turn it over to Jamie.
Awesome. Thank you, Nikki. I hope you guys are as excited as we are about TPM CoLab and the expansion opportunities that that is going to bring, but also just the continued sustainability of lifelong learning for our TPM practitioners, as well as the verification of those skills through the peer review process and a summative assessment attached to this training. There's a lot of exciting developments happening. So we're just so excited to bring you into that fold and to have you be a part of that journey moving forward in the TPM process. So this, of course, brings us to the close of the day, and we do have a couple of minutes. So I'm curious to know via the chat, or please feel free to unmute yourselves at this point if there are any questions or suggestions as we move forward and think about ways that we can support the network. I know we have quite a few folks on this call today who are from cohort 17, so a huge welcome to y'all, to the TPM family. We know that a lot of this is still new. They just did their TPM orientation training last week, so this was a good way to take them a step deeper into the TPM family and the network and all of the incredible resources that you all provide to one another and to our team. But we're excited to have them as part of the TPM family. But for those of you, whether you're new or have been around for years and years, as several of you have been, if there are ways that we can support you all, I heard some great suggestions about the web tool today, ways that we can kind of build on this leadership army of employer champions, thinking about how we can adapt existing
I think we lost Jamie, but if anyone has any suggestions on ways that we can better support you all, we're open to that. So we would open it up to all of you if there are either thoughts or comments about anything that was shared today, or suggestions for additional supports that you all would like to see from us or from the network. We'd be happy to discuss those at this time. And feel free to unmute yourself or pop it in the chat. This is not a silent bunch. I know somebody has something to say about today, or in general, or if you have announcements you want to share with your fellow TPM practitioners. I see a hand raised, Tammy.
Hey, Nikki. Quick question for you guys. So, we've been working on our TPM collaborative in the Wilmington, North Carolina area since September of last year. We are in the process of launching a second one in the Charlotte, North Carolina area later in the fall with some of the graduates from this most recent class from Charlotte Works. So my question is, for marketing purposes, do you guys currently have, because I haven't seen it in the web tools, or are you in the process of developing some communications templates for the practitioners to use? Sort of that initial intro email, this is what it's about, follow up, maybe a newsletter template. Just, do you have anything like that, or have you thought about that?
Yeah, we have examples that other people have used that we could share with you. We're also happy to help you craft things specific to your industry, but I would ask any of our practitioners that have construction collaboratives, particularly if you have any resources that you'd be willing to share with Tammy about how you initially engage some of your employer partners. I see some smiles on the screen. So
that would be very welcome. I mean, obviously we're well versed in what we're doing in the Wilmington area, but the folks that we want to invite to this collaborative are not necessarily just Carolina's AGC members. And so we haven't had the initial prelim conversations, to start getting that early buy-in. So anything anyone can share that has worked would be helpful. I'll put my email address in the chat here. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Tammy. Jamie, I think you're back on, is that right?
I am. I'm on my phone and I've learned my lesson. Don't turn on my camera. So sorry about that. But no, we just, welcome if there are any other comments, suggestions, or requests for resources and support. Just know we are all in this together and here for the network. So by all means, please let us know how we can continue to help you all. Always feel free to reach out to us individually, or if you need a connection. I've gotten a couple of emails today to say, hey, can you connect me to so-and-so, or I heard something really interesting. I would love to be introduced to them. That's what we're here for. We're your cruise directors and your team of support. So let us know how we can help with any of your implementation efforts.
I'll echo that and give you guys some kudos if you don't mind. With the construction collaborative that I just launched, I ran into my first company that hires both union and non-union. And the employer on the call immediately said, what does that look like with TPM? And I was like, you know what? I don't know. And I said, but TPM thankfully is this national network. I said, I guarantee someone has seen this or has worked with unions. Let me just figure out who to talk to. And I don't know if they're still on, but I know Lauren and Anna from out in California. I reached out to Nikki and Jamie and they immediately connected me with them. And we had a very good, very candid conversation about what it looked like for them and kind of best practices or what we should try or how we should try and frame our work around that moving forward. So I think part of it is just lean on this network. I learned so much from everyone else. I love days like today where I get to, I love getting to share what we're doing, but I learned so much from everyone else as well. So it's just continue to learn from one another.
Well, that's wonderful to hear and no surprise. And we tout you all often. Anytime I'm doing any presentation, I talk about just the value of this network and your conscious, consistent graciousness and just willingness to share. So I'm appreciative of each and every one of you who is on this call. And if you're new to the network, hopefully today has been just an eye-opening experience to see really how incredible these leaders are across the country that you are now a part of. So we're thrilled. It is our closing out time. We are so thankful for you guys for hanging with us. If you do have any suggestions, comments moving forward, please let us know, but also make sure that you do click on that link to fill out the survey. This is our kind of biannual attempt to try to collect data from you all in terms of where you are in implementation. Even if you just started, please still go ahead and fill it out. It just helps us overall. But a huge thanks to our speakers, a big thanks to our colleagues, Libby Goodell and Ashley Capo for helping us out today, and to Nikki, the tech master, always so grateful for you and your leadership. And of course to Jason Tishko, for bringing us TPM in the first place, but then of course his continued leadership. So thanks again, guys. So great to see you all, and can't wait until this family is back together again in person, but we'll chat soon.